Hello and welcome to The Valley Voice, a videocast of the Western Tribune. The Valley Voice brings candidates, community leaders, and notable folks from across the state of Arizona to whatever device you're watching from. If you like what you hear, then please check out the Western Tribune at www.westerntrib.com.
Hi, I'm Tanya Contreras Wheeless, and this is The Valley Voice.
Hello, Tanya. Thank you for joining us today.
Hi, thanks for having me. This is fun.
That's great. Tell the viewers a little bit about yourself, where you're from, your work experience. What should we know about you?
Sure. Well, I'm an Arizona native. I grew up in the West Valley on the west side, Peoria. But, my family's story begins before that. So both of my grandparents actually came from other places. So my mom's parents, she was an Air Force brat. My papa was in the Air Force and finished out his service out at Luke. And so that's what took her to the West Valley. And then my dad's story goes back a little farther. So my nana immigrated here from Mexico when she was just a little girl. My great-grandparents were migrant farm workers, and they knew, like so many have known and know, that America is the land of opportunity. And so they traveled up to the border. I believe it was the Texas-Mexico border, where they waited nearly 2 years to get their papers so that they could cross legally. And at that time, I believe it was my nana and her younger brother. And they worked around the western United States on farms. Eventually made it here to Arizona, where they worked on some farms and ultimately decided to set down roots. And so they did that out in Surprise, El Mirage area. That's where my dad grew up. He and my mom met out there, and I guess the rest, they say, is history. So it was, I think from a childhood perspective, it was unique. My parents were very young when they had me. My mom was only 17. It's not how most seniors in high school imagine ending their high school career, but she did, and it was tough when you have, young parents, young family. And like so many of the families today, and I've been reflecting on this actually, I'm sure we'll talk about inflation and the economy, but we were very much a paycheck to paycheck kind of family. And when, there were unexpected costs, or if there was inflation, things like that, ours was the kitchen table, where it wasn't, which vacation are we going to skip? It was which necessity is going to have to wait. How much longer are we going to have to make those cleats last before we get new ones? Maybe we don't get new school clothes right away. And so it was tough in many respects, but I was always blessed to be surrounded by family and a lot of love. And so, I think that's a blessing that many people don't have. So very fortunate for that. So grew up in Peoria. And I started working at the age of 14 in a bakery, a German bakery actually, Der Kaffeekuchen, in Sun City. And I mopped floors, I worked the cash register, Danish and coffee. And it was before baristas were cool. It was way ahead of my time. But that was great. That was and again, work was an important part of who we were, working hard. And so I started there at 14. Graduated from high school. I was able to earn an academic scholarship to Arizona State, and continued working to put myself through college, and was really proud to become the first person in my family to graduate from college, which was a point of pride for my parents and my grandparents. And then went on to law school, also at ASU, so go Devils. I fortunately, in the district I'm running in, Arizona State is located there, so I don't have to feel any split loyalties the way I did when I was doing my March Madness bracket. And I thought, can I have Arizona going the whole way? I did, and I'm now regretting it. Sorry. But so that was that was kind of my childhood and education. So after law school, I was fortunate. I did well. I got a job at one of the top law firms in the country, working here in their Phoenix office. I did labor and employment litigation half the time, and then I worked in the firm's government relations practice the other half, which was an incredible way to get exposed to a number of policy issues in Arizona. And I should mention, while I was in law school, I actually had an internship down at the legislature with Ledge Council. So that's where you actually draft the bills, you draft amendments, and that really kind of whet my appetite for policy and being part of, that legislative process. So spent a few years at the firm there, which were incredible. Learned how to be a better communicator, a better writer. It was just a wonderful place to really kind of get my professional start. But then about 3 years in, one of our clients was hiring. Their CEO was moving to another state, and they needed a new CEO. And so, they always say ignorance is bliss. I thought they called and they're like, the CEO said, I'm moving. Let me know if you know anyone that you think would be great for the job. And I was so earnest. I put down the phone and I'm thinking, who do I know that could do this? And then I thought, I wonder if I could do that. And I called him back and was like, I don't know if, do you think I'd be a competitive candidate? He's like, that's why I called. So I applied, and at the age of 27 became the president and CEO of the Arizona Bankers Association, which was an organization that had existed for over 100 years. In fact, I have held the handwritten minutes of the very first meeting back from, I believe it was 1904 in Prescott, where all the bank presidents had written in for the annual meeting. So it was an incredibly humbling experience to be part of an organization with that kind of history. But it was also a wonderful sort of next step in my development, working on, again, in that aspect, running a trade association, but also working on banking and financial services policy locally, nationally, and really working with our community bankers, which, as many people know, are the backbone of our economies, particularly in rural Arizona. They're the ones that will bank the new businesses, the small companies, and so it was really a wonderful opportunity there. And I did that for about almost 7 years, and then was an executive with the Phoenix Suns. I'm a big sports fan, so this was like one of those going home moments, I got there, I was a senior vice president, oversaw 4 or 5 different departments, and my friend called. This is still the Steve Nash era, and she's like, have you seen Steve Nash yet? And I was like, yeah, but guess what? I said, Dan Marley just walked by my office. So for a kid, we're all prisoners of our own experience, but I grew up going to games at the Madhouse on McDowell. Like, I had watched Marley, Chambers, Eddie Johnson. Like, that's where I cut my teeth. In fact, my mom talks about, I'm going to give away my age here, but when she was pregnant with me was the first time that the Suns went to the finals, and she tells how she stood in line trying to get one of those tickets. So I guess it was in my blood from birth. But I was there with the team, which just was so cool. But it was also a great opportunity to work in a very large organization. Worked on a number of really complex issues related to potential future arena renovations or developments, worked with our basketball side and our business side, worked with a lot of businesses, so that was incredible. And then from there, had my own small business for about 5 years, which again was just another iteration of, how do you do it? Like, I'd been in these big organizations, and it was like the computer breaks, and so you're like, call IT. When you have your own small business, you look around and you're like, who's going to fix this? And you're like, oh, I guess that's me. So then you Google how to fix my Mac. But that was great. And then I guess lastly, I would say, you can tell my background has been in the private sector. I enjoyed that. I thought that that's where I would always stay. And then I got a call that Senator Martha McSally, who had just been appointed to her position, was looking for a state director. And I wasn't really sure what that was. And once I understood that it was really, almost like being the CEO in the respect that we were going to open up multiple offices, handle staffing, constituent services, all of these things. And so, long story short, I said, yes, I'm interested, quickly met with the team and the senator, got that job. And so I spent 2 years serving with her, serving our state in the U.S. Senate. And that was really the first time I got to see from the inside how government can work for people and the good that can be done even when it feels like, legislation's not moving. So for me, what I really took away was the constituent service experience and the way we can be advocates for Arizonans, for constituents, with the federal government, which is this behemoth bureaucracy, and people can get lost. And so the idea that our team, could help people get the care at the VA they needed, or get their Social Security coverage that they are owed, it was tremendous, and certainly something I'm going to take with me into my next venture. But that's kind of I guess, from A to Z.
Well, that was a great story about how your family transitioned here to Arizona from Mexico, and also your work experience going from the private sector into now the, what would you call it, public sector? Or,
yeah, I think so. Public service.
Public service, that's the word.
Sure.
Yes. What made you want to get into public service?
So I think it was a natural progression of, in the first instance, if I'm honest, when I was contacted about the Senate position, it was more thinking, I've always sought in any position, going back to the bankers when I was young and really didn't fully understand what I was even signing up for. I've always thought, do I feel like I can add value? Do I feel like I will grow? And does it sound like something that'll be fun? Because if not, what's the point of doing it? And so in the first instance, when I heard about the position and it was explained really what the senator needed, I felt like I could be a strong wingwoman for her, because I had all of these private sector experiences of building teams, building consensus, finding and hiring really great talent, putting together systems to make sure that things run operationally well. And so in the first instance, I thought, okay, I feel like I can add value. I feel like this would definitely be fun, never done it before, and I knew I could learn a lot. So I would say that's what really pulled me in. But then what made me really glad that I said yes and want to stay, and part of what is now inspiring my run for office myself, was this recognition that for most people, they are out there living their lives, and their parents and their business owners and their partners, and what they really need is for government to work and kind of be seamless, right? No one likes it. You don't want there to be a problem where you have to interface with government. But what I found is that you have to, as someone who is then working in public service, you have an opportunity to make that a reality. Meaning, you can advocate for policies that can make people's lives better. You can advocate for a smaller government that gets government out of people's lives, which I'm very passionate about. And you can also do things, and I talked about constituent services, you can do things where when they are having difficulties, you can step in and help. And that feels so good. And so whether you're in the private sector or the public sector, that idea that you are making life better for people, you are providing some value to them, and in some maybe small way, you are helping them out of a jam, is just, it's a great thing. And it's kind of addictive. You do it and you're like, I want to do more of that.
Okay. It's really interesting. When you were, it was the Bakers Association, correct?
Yes.
CEO of that, and then you were an executive for the Phoenix Suns. So you had to work with a lot of different people to get things accomplished. How will you foster collaboration among people from different backgrounds and partisan persuasions if you are elected?
Sure. Well, I think as you highlighted, that is what I've spent my career doing, and I'm excited to do that in Congress. So what I always did is, and I had to work with members on both sides of the aisle, Republicans and Democrats. I had to work with people who were both within the industry and maybe the customers or the consumers. So I often walked into rooms or sat at tables where there was disagreement on what the next step was going to be. And so I plan to bring with me what made me very successful at building that consensus and getting results in the private sector to business. And a few things that I would do. One, I walked into every room expecting to make new friends, expecting to get a result, right? So, and I think in life we find what we're looking for. If you walk into every room thinking that everyone's against you and they're never going to be for you, more often than not, that's what you're going to find. And so I walked in thinking, hey, we've got a problem here that I'm going to walk it, we're going to find a way to solve it. So that's one thing. The second thing is, I also start by looking for what we have in common, right? What's the one thing we can all agree on? And sometimes in really contentious issues, the only thing you can agree on is that there's a problem, right? But you start there. And then when you start there, you just start building out to see, okay, well, if we agree on that, can we agree on this? And can we agree on that? And you go as far out as you can. And I think that's one element of deal making that has to happen, and collaboration, compromise. And I think when people see that you are coming to the table with an open heart and a desire to solve the problem, they reciprocate that often. Not always, but often. And so you can sometimes surprise yourself at what you can find there. So building that consensus is something I have done successfully and will continue to do. The other thing I'm not afraid to do is hold my ground. I think there is such thing as a bad deal. Sometimes no deal is the best deal, and I'm not afraid to walk away from the table. One of my former colleagues, I was trying to encourage his team to do something that they didn't want to do. We were going back and forth, and his point, my point, and I remember he looked at me, he's like, dang, he's like, T, you are like a velvet hammer. I'm like, velvet hammer? He's like, you're tough, you don't back down. He's like, but the whole time it feels kind of like soft and nice. You don't even know what's happening. and I thought, I was like, I don't know, is this a compliment or not? But I think it is, and I think in large part that is part of my style, which is I enjoy people, I enjoy the process, but at the end of the day, I know what I'm fighting for, or what my client's fighting for, or what my principles are, depending on the scenario, and I'm not afraid to advocate for those. I'm also not afraid to walk away from a bad deal. And so those are the things that have made me successful in the private sector, and I absolutely know will make me a successful legislator and lawmaker. The last thing I would say about that is you have to be willing to listen, many times more than talk, and understanding other people's perspectives. And sometimes the change that has to happen is within us, on our side of the table, and being willing to accept that. Not always the case, but I think especially as a public servant, and that's what a congresswoman is, a public servant, I think that is incredibly important, something I will not lose sight of, which is I'm here to listen to a broad variety of perspectives, and I hope that people know and trust that I will do that. I will listen with an open heart, and I will always be looking for a way to get to yes.
Okay. It's refreshing to hear that when you walk into a room that you think people have the best intentions. I think a lot of work can be done when that happens.
Absolutely, and it's so much better than the alternative. Than walking in and feeling like everyone's out to get you, or like you have to be out to get everyone else. It's just a better feeling. And look, sometimes you're wrong. Sometimes people are just jerk faces. But I can honestly say I think that is the exception, not the rule.
Okay. Shifting gears to more of Arizona issues.
Sure.
In your mind, what are some of the biggest issues facing Arizona at this moment in time?
Well, there are a lot of issues. As someone who's running for federal office, I'm probably most focused on the federal nexus with issues in Arizona right now. I think, one of the top issues for sure is water, and we talk about that. And there's a lot that can be done, certainly at a federal level, although I know enough about water to know that much of it is done here locally. And so as I think about what the federal government should be doing a better job of, what problems it has created in Arizona, the first one that comes to mind is the border crisis. It is unconscionable what is happening at our border, and it's been happening for some time. I mean, every month we see the report come out that we've doubled the apprehensions from year over year. It's the highest we've ever had. And all of that means the problem is growing and growing. And I will tell you, I went down to Yuma, the Yuma sector, probably about a month now, because I wanted to see what is really happening. Sometimes you think, oh gosh, on TV they're just showing you, they're showing you that much of the picture when really it's like this, and maybe it's overblown. Let me tell you, it is not overblown. The crisis that's down there, the flow, the tragedy, frankly. And so a few of the things that I observed are that, number one, people absolutely are just walking right across and into the country. The cartels absolutely control our border, and we saw it with our own eyes. The bus that comes by to drop folks off, the cartel member who meets them, who tells them what they need to do. They walk down, another one, helps them get across and has told them all the things they need to say. That is true. When we talked with one of the families, I had an interpreter with me and said it was a family of maybe four, no, it was probably five, I believe, and coming from Colombia, not Mexico. Interestingly, that day we encountered people from India, Colombia, Cuba, Venezuela. I don't think we encountered anyone from Mexico that day. But we talked to them, and they were coming over, and they wanted to work and have a better life. All things I think we can all relate to. They were indebted to the cartel tens of thousands of dollars. And we asked them, how did you know? Like, how did you know to come here? How did you know to, that you can have one bag? All these things, sort of tricks of the trade, for lack of a better word. And he just looked at us and he said, everyone knows. Like, everyone knows the borders open. Everyone knows, you come here, you say the magic words, and they're gonna let you in. Like, everyone knows. And that's a bit startling, maybe? I don't know, maybe, but that's what it is. And as we talk to them, and we talk to others, and I talk to some folks that have been doing this in Yuma, one of the great tragedies is that the Biden administration, our government, is enabling a criminal enterprise down there, the way folks are being trafficked and victimized. And these families who are now coming into our country seeking a better life now owe some really dangerous people a lot of money. And even in a congressional hearing, the head of the FBI acknowledged that this is a modern form of slavery. And so to folks on the left who think this is some sort of benevolence to just let people flood in, to have created this opportunity for the cartel, I say absolutely not. Ushering people in to modern day slavery is not kind in any way whatsoever. I want to welcome people into our country. That is how my family got here. So I've often said to people, it is common sense to me to know who's coming into our country. We all have locks on our front doors in our homes. Is that because we don't let anyone in? Is that because we say everyone stay out? No. It's because we know that it is common sense to know who is coming into our home and to invite them in, and also to keep the bad guys out. It is the same at our border. And the bad guys, I've talked about the trafficking aspect of it, but let's not forget the drugs. And this is what I hear about every week when I am out talking to mothers and fathers and grandparents in the district, is the flood of drugs and the fentanyl that is coming into our country, again, at record amounts. They are confiscating it. It is the leading cause of death right now for 18 to 45-year-olds in our country is fentanyl. Like, this is dangerous, it is real, and it can be stopped if we can secure our border. But until then, I have no expectation that that is going to change. And the last thing I want to touch on in terms of the cost is just the economic cost associated to this. Yuma sector is a great example of this, where we have a huge agriculture economy down there. We provide produce all over the world from Yuma. Well, when you have folks just willy-nilly walking through those fields, that can create potential health and safety hazards and contamination. Now, the folks down there work really hard to make sure that doesn't happen, but it can. And if it does, it can be devastating to a farmer who has got a crop out there that might now have been compromised. And so there are a number of aspects, and that's why I always say, for me, border is my number one issue, because it touches so many people in so many ways, and also because it's preventable. Because we know how to, are we ever going to get to zero? Unlikely. But we know that the numbers a couple of years ago were a lot lower than they are now. And so the last thing I want to say is just today we heard from the Biden administration that they are going to lift Title 42, remain in Mexico, in May. And they are doing that without any plan on how they are going to deal with the tens of thousands of people that will now be coming to the border. And our border patrol, our border cities, our nonprofits will be absolutely overwhelmed and overrun. And I hate to say it, but this feels like Afghanistan again, where you went in, you made some bold change with absolutely no plan on what you were going to do with the people and the folks who were left to pick up the pieces. I strongly hope that Congress will put it to the Biden administration and demand that they come up with a plan before May 23rd. But I have to tell you, based on what I've seen, I'm not confident that will happen.
We touched on a lot of big issues. Is there any others that you'd like to touch on?
Well, there are probably two more that we should at least acknowledge. One of them is the federal debt and the deficit spending that we have been doing. And that is critical. We've talked about the economy, we've talked about national defense. I believe this is an area where the two meet. Having this burgeoning deficit that we have, the debt that we have, I believe is a national security risk. It makes us vulnerable. There are foreign countries that own some of that debt. Also, though, it will impede our ability to further fund the things that we need. Look, we are spending money every day in Congress that we do not have. We have a historic level of debt in this country. And one of the things that's going to happen because of the failed fiscal policies, as we talked about inflation, one of the ways they're remedying that, and appropriately, I'm not critical of this, but the Fed is now starting to ratchet up interest rates. Well, guess what? All of that debt we hold, we pay interest on it as well. And so as that happens, the percent of GDP that is going to go to us simply servicing that debt is going to continue to grow, making the hole even deeper. That makes us weaker as a nation, aside from the fact that it is taking more money out of your pocket and giving it to government bureaucrats to spend on things that the federal government has no business spending on. So that's one. The second is big tech. Big tech is out of control. And I was just back in Washington and I met with Representative Kathy McMorris Rogers, who, when the Republicans take back the House, will very likely be the chair of the Commerce Committee. And she and Jim Jordan are already working on a comprehensive bill to take on big tech so that we're ready to go on day one to hold them accountable. When we think about big tech, there's really two aspects to it, right? There's one, which is sort of the size and the antitrust concerns, right? When you have an Amazon, for example, that encourages small businesses to come and join their marketplace, but then mines that data in a way which allows Amazon to unfairly compete with those small businesses, I think there are some issues there that we need to take a look at. And then second, what people are probably more familiar with is just the censorship and the silencing of certain voices that we've seen by big tech. One of the most egregious examples is, I think, the Hunter Biden laptop story. The New York Post posts that story. Again, this is a reputable media outlet that does that, and everyone immediately shuts them down. You know, Twitter takes them off Twitter, saying that it's fake news or it's disinformation. Then everyone jumps on that bandwagon, silences this story. You've got intel officials saying this looks like classic Russian disinformation. Silences his voice. What do we now know? We know that that is absolutely, that was an accurate story at that time. And even the New York Times has now copped to that fact, although they did it like, I don't know, 4 paragraphs down in a story. But that type of thing is really unnerving, because that goes to the underpinnings of our country and our Constitution, freedom of speech, and people are unhappy about it. And it's not just Republicans. It's not just however they want to paint us as, you know, sort of the right wing. Everyday folks, you start telling people, my mom, she's on my Twitter feed, and she calls me. She says, I cannot see this post. It says that it's sensitive or dangerous. She's like, what are you posting? Thinking that I didn't, like, what are you posting on? I said, Mom, it was a picture of a sunset at the border in Yuma. And I probably said something about, you know, the border's out of control. Why on earth was that flagged and censored for my mom to see? Just because someone somewhere didn't like the content of that. I got no notice of it. I had no due process to defend myself. Anyhow, those things they have reached a fever pitch. They need to be addressed, and I look forward to working on those.
Okay, those are really interesting problems with complex solutions, and I know that out of 435 people, which you're hoping to be one of, that it's not only on you. You did mention the economy, and what are your thoughts on the economic situations of the United States right now?
Sure. So you had asked me, what are the top issues? Border is number one. I'll tell you the economy is a very close second. And I don't know that would have always been the case. However, inflation has made this really top of mind for East Valley families. And so right now, there's no denying that our economy is in trouble. There were experts who are way smarter than me who have been warning about the coming inflation. When you pump trillions and trillions of dollars into the economy, that is the natural expectation. We increased demand without increasing supply because of some of the challenges coming out of COVID. And so we find ourselves now here in Arizona with the highest inflation in the country. The Wall Street Journal last week did an entire story on it, and we're at over 10% here, even though the national average is slightly below that. That hits families, that hits our retirees. I've got some large retiree communities in the district. They're on fixed incomes. So even though some workers have seen minor increases in their real wages, not enough to keep up with inflation, but if you are a retiree on a fixed income, you're not seeing any increase. And so now your limited dollars have lower buying power. This is creating a lot of angst and a lot of concern. And what do the Democrats meet that with? Things like, hey, the cost of gasoline's going up. We have the answer. Buy an electric car. Joe Biden says he'll save $80 a month doing that. Well, go tell that to a single mom with 3 kids who's trying to figure out how to put food on the table. Going to buy a Tesla isn't exactly on her menu of options. It shows how incredibly out of touch they are. And I'm hearing it every day. I mentioned at the beginning, my family growing up, paycheck to paycheck. That's how many Americans live. And so we are now in a spot where people are having to make really difficult decisions about how they're going to spend their money. And at the same time, we've got a federal government, Biden administration, that was late to even acknowledge that there was a problem. I think for several months we were told inflation was transitory. They enacted numerous energy policies that have contributed to higher costs. Now they tell us it's Putin, but let's remember, if you look at a graph, these costs were rising before the invasion of Ukraine. And so they're just out of touch. And I think that's what people see, is we have too many career politicians who are out of touch, and they're more focused on the soundbite and spin than they are actually solving the real problems that our East Valley families are facing.
Switching gears to your primary competition, so what differentiates you from your primary candidates?
So I think one of the great things about our country is that we have a primary, and so there's going to be a great exchange of ideas and perspectives. That being said, I believe that I am the strongest candidate in the race for a few reasons. One, my background, which I've already talked about, in terms of having vast experience in the private sector, bringing people together to solve complex problems. Again, as an attorney, drafting legislation, drafting amendments, having to read court cases that interpret those. So a very good understanding of the lawmaking process, which is at the heart of a congresswoman's work, I think, number one. Number two, I mentioned it, but bringing people together and being able to create consensus to solve problems. And I want to be really clear about that. There are a lot of people that can talk. Talk is cheap, but being focused on creating solutions and getting results is something I have a track record of doing and will continue to do. The third thing is I am the person best situated to take on the incumbent in the general election. That's just the reality. If you look at this district and you look at what we need to do as Republicans to win, this is a swing seat. This is not an Andy Biggs race. This is not even a Debbie Lesko race in terms of the makeup of the district. This is a true swing seat, which is why it has national attention on it because both the Republicans and the Democrats know nationally that the path to a majority in November leads through Arizona and this seat in particular. So the person who is going to win is someone who is eminently qualified and can talk about real policy issues, someone who can hit the ground running on day one, and that's really where my experience with Senator McSally comes in. I'm not going to be beholden to consultants or other Hill folks to tell me who I should hire and how we should organize our office. I have actually done it, and so I know exactly what I need to do to have an effective office. The third thing is you have to be able to appeal to a broad group of people. And what I know is when I think about the issues that are most important to me that I want to talk about, they are kitchen table issues. I am motivated by the American dream. My family believed in that. I am a product of it, and I will preserve that for future generations. And that means making sure that we are secure, that there is opportunity, and that we protect freedom. When I talk about those core issues, those know no party. Those are the same things that a mom going to bed as a Democrat thinks about, as a father who is an independent, or the grandmother who is a Republican. And so I am going to be able to reach those voters. And lastly, I am building a campaign built to win. Whether we like it or not, campaigns take infrastructure and they take money. I've got a tremendous team. We are lean and mean, but it's made up of people who know how to win tough congressional races. And I'm raising the money that we're going to need to take on a well-funded incumbent, and that's who I'll be facing. I was very honored to get the endorsement of House Leadership's Representative Elise Stefanik in her EPAC. I've been endorsed by Winning for Women, which is a group that's very influential and helpful in electing conservative women. And I've also been supported by the Congressional Leadership Fund, which is the super PAC of House leadership. And so I'm going to have the resources to go the distance. And the last thing I would say, I think I'm the best for the district because I've lived in the district and raised my family there for 20 years. Our kids have gone to the schools there. We have grocery shopped there and gone to church there and done all of those things. And the incumbent no longer lives in this district. And when I talk to folks in the East Valley, the idea that a big city mayor from Phoenix is going to represent them and their values in East Mesa doesn't sit very well.
Okay. How do you plan on winning over young voters? As you know, the district that you're running to represent has plenty of them.
It does have plenty of them, thank goodness. I am excited about the energy in our young people. I think if you look over time where you have created great change, where you have created movements, it has been led by young people who have that energy and that same naivete that I talked about having so many years ago. And so I am encouraged by that. I mean, certainly on the Republican side, we have got the college Republicans, we've got young Republicans, we have got Arizona Women of Action, which is drawing women older and younger. We have so many people who are energized right now. And I'm going to, one, hope that they will support me and support the campaign and tap into that energy. And I think you do it by meeting people where they're at. You know, we were at an event with some young Republicans, and one of my opponents was talking about the need for school choice. I support school choice. I am a firm believer in it. My kids have gone to various schools. But when you're sitting with a bunch of folks who are 18 to 25, who they're thinking about, how do I get my first job? Will there be a job? What do I do about student debt? It's a little tone deaf to talk about things that you're thinking about years later. And so I will meet people where they are. I will also listen. I'm at a place where I've had a career. We own a home. We have done many of the things you seek out to do when you're young. I want to hear from young people. What are the challenges? What do you want a future to look like where you're raising your families? And so I think that you do that by showing up where they are, you know, going on campus, going to the groups, listening, being open. I hope it doesn't mean I have to get on TikTok because I don't know how to do the TikTok. Just kidding, I totally figured it out. But all joking aside, I think the energy in younger voters right now is off the charts. It's very exciting, and I look forward to really engaging them in our campaign.
Okay, how do you plan on winning people that are middle of the road or not convinced about you?
Sure. So I think it's going back to what I said about those core issues that are the American dream, which is security, opportunity, and freedom. Those are the things that people care about. It's like, not to get too deep, but you think about like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You know, you can't get to the big ideas until you've done the basic things for survival. Do we have a home? Do we have food? Then you can think about things like, are my kids getting a great education? Is there going to be career advancement for me because we have great new companies moving in and there's increased opportunity? Are we safe? Talk about something that is a fundamental need. I've been so dismayed to see where the left has gone in terms of defunding the police and not supporting our men and women of law enforcement. That will never be the case with me, nor has it been. I have family who have worked in law enforcement. They make it possible for us to do all the other things that we need to do. They provide that safety, and I want to make sure they're supported. Same with the military. National security is incredibly important. We're seeing that play out on a world stage right now. That means we have to be the biggest, baddest guys on the block. You know, bullies respond to one thing, and it's strength. I hope that we don't have to use that, but I do believe we have to be prepared and ready to use it. And so we talked about issues, particularly federal issues, and funding for our defense is a top priority. We have seen that wane over time. And if you look at historically, we've spent about 4 to 4.5% of GDP on our national defense. We are well below that now, and even with some of the increases that are being talked about in Congress currently, we will still be below that at a time where the threats are increasing in terms of having China and having Russia and having, still worrying about what's happening in the Middle East, but also the type of warfare that we are fighting now versus what we will need to face in the future. And so focusing on supporting those efforts so that we are secure. So all of that to say, I'm going to talk to people about the issues that they care about, not the issues that you only read if you live on Twitter, or the issues that you might only read if you are at a political event. What are the things that are keeping people up? And letting them know that I hear them and I care. And I care because I've been them. I care because I have kids. And I'm worried about their future the same way they're worried about their children's future. And so when they send me to Congress, they know that not only do they have a friend, but they have an advocate. And while they might not always agree on what I think the solutions are to certain things, they're going to always know where I stand. And they're going to always know that I will listen to them, and that when elected, I will be the representative of the entire district, regardless of party. And I look forward to that opportunity.
And then to round out the interview, what would winning the seat mean to you?
It's a really good question. I talked about my Nana at the top of this, and I talked about her story and my family's story coming to this country in search of opportunity. And I reflect back on my journey and my path, and to think that the little girl that I was at Altaloma School in Peoria is now in a position where I'm running for the Congress, and when elected will become the first Latina to represent Arizona of either party in the United States Congress, is incredibly humbling and moving, and means to me that that same little girl who's still at Altaloma will hopefully look and see that anything is possible. And that is the story of our country. It doesn't matter how you start. It's how hard you're willing to work, how much heart and grit you have. You can become whatever you want. And in my case, I hope that means I will be the Congresswoman for the 4th District of Arizona.
That's great to hear. Well, thank you for coming on the Valley Voice today, Tanya. We really appreciate you coming on.
Thank you for having me.